also is Emergency Order 2020, it is not prudent or feasible for the board, public, or staff to meet at the regular location face to face. And for that reason, we're holding this meeting electronically. I worked with district staff, collaborated with them, I guess, and they put together a thoughtful process for migrating meetings electronically and making sure that we all tested out the technology so that we could all be heard and hear and see the materials that are shared, and as the meetings can remain open to the public. You'll notice that the agenda is very tightly focused. We are working to ramp up so that we can use this electronic meeting format for more ambitious agendas in April, but this is a good opportunity for us to make sure that we know how it works. A word about logistics. We've all had enough conference calls to know that it's really important that one person at a time speak, and it's really helpful to have even a little gap, a few seconds between, so we don't have overlap. It's very confusing that way. I will be doing a roll call for not only for the roll call, but also going through in order to take votes and to do initial comments on the discussion items. I'm going to choose the order of the way we sit at the dais. So I'll start with Manager Hejmati and work down to Manager Maxwell, but putting myself last. Please use your name when you begin to speak, and feel free to speak in the third person. For example, White moves approval of the agenda in that format. And with that, I'll proceed to the roll call. Manager Hejmati.
Hejmati is present.
Manager Miller.
Dick Miller is present.
Manager Rogness.
Kurt Rogness is present.
Manager Loftus.
Present.
Manager Olson.
Present.
Manager Maxwell.
Present.
And I am present. Now, this is the place in our agenda where we have matters from the floor. James Whisker serves as host for this meeting. Mr. Whisker, can you tell us if anyone from the public has joined the meeting?
President White, it doesn't look like we have any members of the public in the meeting.
Thank you very much. We are going to be adding an item to the agenda at 11.1, Resolution 20-021. With that addition, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Name first, please.
Kurt.
Rogness moves approval of the agenda. Is there a second?
Hejmati approves. Seconds.
Thank you. Roll call vote again. Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Rogness.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
And Manager White votes aye. We proceed to the consent agenda. On our consent agenda this evening, we have approval of the March 12th, 2020 board minutes, approval of the general checking account register. The surety checking account has no entries, and approval of the wire transfers. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Bill Olson.
Move it by Manager Olson. Is there a second?
Hejmati seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Hejmati. Manager Hejmati. All those in, oops, sorry, I got to go back down. Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Manager Rogness.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well, Manager White. My president's report is really just a note of gratitude. Staff has really stepped up and made sure that not only were they doing all the work of this very busy season so that we could, if not open the doors, at least be conducting our business at the same time as adapting to this way of working off-site and being in compliance with the orders and the recommendations from the CDC and the governor's office. And also thanks to all the board members who worked so well with staff to get our WebEx set up and trained on that so we can make sure that this would all work. So I'm really grateful to the work that everyone has done in this extraordinary time. We have no other reports unless someone has been to a meeting they want to report on. Then notice that the event schedule is in the agenda. The Citizens Advisory Committee for April 1st has been canceled. And the April 9th and 23rd board and committee meetings will be conducted on the normal dates and time by WebEx again. Then let us move to the action item 11.1, which is resolution 20-021. Mr. Whisker.
Thank you, President White, board managers. I'd sent a draft resolution that came together rather quickly today for the board's consideration that would, if you act on it, determine the district's activities or projects that fall within the definition of critical sector work. And this is in response to Governor Walz's executive order 2020 that was issued yesterday, encouraging or directing Minnesotans to stay at home. And in general, the watershed district needs to identify under this executive order functions that are necessary to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and to preserve the essential elements of the financial system of government, and to continue priority services. And so in coordination with Lewis and President White, we had framed out how we might think about priority services for the district to consider proceeding work on. And some considerations framed in the resolution and the document that I'd sent over include, if we proceed with work, are we preventing measurable risk to public health or safety? Are we preventing measurable risk of damage to public or private property? Is the work required to fulfill a legal obligation? Does the work prevent measurable public financial loss? Or does the work serve the public health, safety, or welfare in some other material way that we are able to articulate? And so we've done a pass over the last week of work and been, in a constant state of evolution in terms of how we're moving our critical work forward and taking stock of strategic initiatives and how those timelines might be impacted. Today we sat down as a staff team and then again with President White Lewis and took inventory of work that can't be completed from home by our staff or contractors between now and April 10th. Of that work, 3 projects have been identified as priority services where staff is recommending to continue working under the guidance offered by the CDC and Department of Health or social distancing and other best practices, pending agreement from watershed district partners, our municipal partners, and of course our contractors. And I think I might have said 3, but in fact it's a few more than that. Number 1, inspection, operation, and maintenance of Grays Bay Dam, control structure, as well as the carp bearers in the upper watershed and 6 Mile, the Arden Park restoration project, the boardwalk that's in construction at Wassman Park, and then maintenance activities on the boardwalk at the Minnehaha Creek Preserve. And those are the 4 areas that we believe meet the critical sector exemptions. I'm going to step through very briefly the basic rationale for each, and then we can take questions and discussion. For Arden Park, where there's 2 critical items on the substantial completion punch list that we feel need to be advanced in the next 2 weeks because they relate to a level of safety. One is there are a number of handrails within the park that provide access to the park down steep slopes on stairways. And as we know, the executive order doesn't necessarily encourage, but allows for outdoor recreation activity. And CDC has been identifying that there's significant mental health issues associated with COVID-19. And one of their mitigation strategies for the general public is to get outside and get fresh air and enjoy open space while following best practices. And that's something that we've seen at the parks. and lands, public lands that the district owns. There's actually been a peak in use. So we want to make sure those handrails get constructed within the park. Also, there's a need to complete construction or correct construction on the stormwater swales. As of right now, are holding water, not consistent with design specifications. Members of the public that have been tracking the project closely have raised some concerns because that open water is in proximity to open space where kids are playing, and they're concerned about somebody tripping and falling and potential drowning risk. So we feel that both of those items present a safety concern to the public, particularly given the park's highly used. It's an active existing park. And both items are required as part of the contractual obligations of Rachel Contracting, who indicated earlier this week a willingness to continue working. And staff is circling back to them actively right now to make sure that they're still comfortable continuing to work under Executive Order 2020. The next area is the Wassman Park Boardwalk, which is near completion. We have helical supports in the ground. Decking is mid-completion. Generally left unfinished, we feel like the boardwalk might represent an attractive nuisance, encouraging use of the completed section of the boardwalk in what's otherwise an active construction area where we have sections of helical piping remaining exposed. And we think that that presents a legitimate public safety concern. Beyond that, there's a general risk that the district and its taxpayers might incur an increased risk of cost, contract dispute, or potential warranty issues if we suspend the work, because we'll be requiring the contractor to demobilize and then remobilize. And again, similarly to Rachel, the contractor, Pember, has expressed a desire to continue working and anticipates being able to finish the remainder of the boardwalk work out there next week, the week of March 30th. Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk, as the board knows, we've experienced some issues with the structural integrity of the lumber on site, and the rotting's been an ongoing operation and maintenance issue that you know and are familiar with how we're chasing that issue down with our contractors in coordination with legal counsel. More immediately, we feel like that represents a public safety concerns as we've got holes beginning to open up in sections of the decking, and there's a lot of users out there right now. We did do some spring inspections of 2020 with Blackstone and staff, and they're indicating along the spectrum of complete failure to advise to replace. We could have up to 400 boards needing some level of repair, and with the park being highly used, that's something that we feel like falls under the public safety criteria for maintaining critical services under EO 2020. The last two fall within specific categorical exemptions. Number 2, public works in the executive order for workers who support the operation, inspection, and maintenance of essential dams. That's the operation of Grays Bay Dam, obviously, which provides flood mitigation and management for both Lake Minnetonka and Minnehaha Creek. That work would be completed by staff, not a contractor. We have one staff person that would manage that, and we do have a redundancy plan in place in the event that Janet Jonley, who's our dam operator, gets sick or is otherwise indisposed. Similarly, the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay carp barriers, of which there are 3 that are required to prevent carp migration within that subwatershed, do require a level of routine maintenance that if it doesn't happen, those structures can accumulate debris and impede flow, essentially acting like a dam that can raise water levels and create risk of localized flooding. And that's something that we've seen at least one of the structures a risk of. So those are the areas that we're recommending the board consider making a determination on this evening for district activities or projects that fall under the exemptions in Governor Walz's Executive Order 2020 as critical sector work. And I will pause there and see if you've got any questions for myself, staff, or Lewis.
This is Bill Olson. Arden Park work with the swales. How do we go about solving that one? Is that a contractor rebuild?
I have the answer to that, Bill, but I think since we have Mike on the phone and he's been working very closely with contractor, engineer, and Laura, our project manager, I'm going to have him weigh in if he's still available to speak up.
Yeah, I'm here, Manager Olson, managers. The short answer is that it hasn't been resolved yet. We have a good understanding of what the issues most likely are, and we've presented the options to the contractor. It was last week actually where we voiced to them the concern with why they aren't performing to the standard as set forth, and requested, rather than dictate what the means and methods are for them to correct it, asked them to suggest what they would anticipate doing in order to correct it. And they have indicated they received the memo. They're going to do their own internal investigation and determine if they feel our analysis is correct. And then we will sort of work in coordination to determine the least impactful way to correct issues on site.
Stop at this point and see if there's a motion to adopt the resolution 021.
Gene Maxwell, I'll approve.
Thank you. Is there a motion to second?
Second.
Andrew
Kurt.
Rodman, thank you. And then let's go down the road and just write down person by person and take the first comments in order. Manager Hejmati, do you have any questions or comments? Manager,
No, I do not. Hejmati does not have any comments.
Manager Miller,
No comment.
thank you. Manager Rognus,
No comment.
Manager Loftus,
No questions.
Manager Olson, you've already asked a question. Do you have any more?
Nope.
Manager Maxwell?
I would just say that I think they're all good projects that have to be done because of liability. Like we want to get tied with any kind of liabilities if something would go wrong, because they're telling people to go out and walk and do the exercise and everything else. Something's going to happen down there if we don't address it.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Are there any other questions or comments before we vote? Thank you, Mr. Whisker, for that report, and Mr. Smith for your work on that as well. Those in favor, Manager Hejmati?
Aye.
Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Rognus?
Aye.
Manager Loftus?
Aye.
Manager Olson?
Aye.
Manager Maxwell?
Aye.
White votes aye. Resolution passes. Logistics question about getting it signed. Could Manager Rognus, as secretary, sign it and mail it in? How would you like to handle that, Mr. Whisker?
One of the things that we can do that we've been doing with the payment vouchers on invoices is through PDF, through Adobe, you can set up digital time and date stamped. That's something that I can try and work on with Manager Rognus, although he was in a little bit earlier this week and I've been troubleshooting his iPad. So if that doesn't work, print and mail a copy.
Someone has a noisy something.
The runes
That-
headset.
It's a Ruth's headset.
All fixed, then great. And we are ready for the administrator's report, Mr. Whisker.
Yeah, thank you, President White. I think the main thing to focus in on tonight is just to provide a brief overview of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District's response planning related to COVID-19 to date. I think the board's relatively up to speed, but I'll provide a broad overview for the record and to refresh the board's memory and see if there's questions or concerns with regards to actions that we've taken to date, or any suggestions or questions and concerns about plans for the immediate future. I think the board has been tracking that following the Sunday, March 15th Executive Order 20-02 from Governor Walz that closed schools. The Watershed District moved from strongly encouraging our workforce to work remotely to requiring it as of Wednesday, March 18th. That was last week. And so as of last week, on Wednesday, everybody had been provided and tested VPN access. District server was up and accessible, and everybody was able to run on WebEx. And we had closed the office to public visitors. So towards the end of last week, functions really dedicated towards getting staff up and running and designing new workflow and running in digital teams, just getting used to that workspace and how to communicate with each other and get work done, as well as starting to map out some of the critical functions that needed to be advanced in the coming weeks, some of which you just discussed, as well as something that President White mentioned earlier, getting the board online and up and running and tested for remote meetings. So just a lot of infrastructure, IT infrastructure prep to get us all prepared to be able to participate remotely. Earlier part of this week, we got most of the staff team together for a preliminary pass on critical functions as well as longer range strategic initiatives to understand what the schedules were, what the status of those projects are currently, and take a first pass at what we anticipate some of the schedule changes or impacts or adjustments might be that we might need to make in the coming weeks. I'm still synthesizing all that information, and I'll be able to provide, I think, more detail on how things may or may not be impacted at our upcoming meetings in April, the next of which is on April 9th, 2 weeks from now. So we'll continue working with staff and taking through all the initiatives in each program area. We'll obviously be monitoring direction from the governor and Department of Health and just tracking other information related to COVID. And hopefully at that point in time, we'll have enough information to make some more concrete predictions about how operations, projects, and programs may or may not be impacted through the summer for Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. In general, I would say in speaking with staff, feeling relatively optimistic about our ability to maintain continuity and continue providing service without any major impacts up to this point. For permitting, we're really haven't noticed much of a change. There hasn't been much of an impact. Everybody is up and running online. The permitting department's contact list has been pinged and applications continue to roll in digitally. Public continue to contact staff and work with them and coordinate workflow with them, our engineer and legal counsel, to get permits processed and issued. And we can expect, at least tentatively, some permits on the agenda, maybe even in the month of April for board consideration. We have, through this 2-week period of time, leading up to April 10th, suspended on-site construction inspections. Staff are still able to receive complaints, and we'll process those accordingly in coordination with municipal partners. But most of the sites that are still operating are larger in nature under National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, NPDS, and generally operating at a level where they're being proactive with regards to sediment and erosion control. So we're not terribly concerned about what the next 2 weeks are going to bring with regards to construction inspections. Research and monitoring, also we're in relatively good shape. We're early in the monitoring season, so we're not anticipating too much impact on the ability to collect and analyze data through 2020, at least at this point. We have canceled 20 spring carp trapping that would require a high level of staff and contractor interaction. And that work also occurs within a very small window of time. And in fact, some of the contractors and commercial fishermen under the executive order are stepping back from that work. That shouldn't have a huge impact on the overall effectiveness of our projects at this point. And we'll be evaluating over the next 2 weeks what we can do to keep that work moving the rest of the year. Like I said, we're not going to be able to get out and collect early April stream data, which does include flow and quality. We'll be missing the first stream data collection event, but we don't think that that's really going to compromise the quality of the long-term data set. And In terms of our ability to inform dam operations, of course, we've got our partnership with National Weather Service, which is running forecasts and predictive modeling for the lake. We still have real-time remote gauges at USGS gauges for Lake Minnetonka and Hiawatha. And so we have the information we need there to be able to continue operating. Staff have been working to try and install some of those remote sensor network, the ResNet sensors that we've received from the manufacturer. We've got about 5 in total. We've got one of them in. Kaylee sent a nice video via our online meeting chat app yesterday of her out in the field all alone doing a ribbon cutting for the first ResNet. So that is going to be online and up and running. If we do have delays over the next several months, that will impact our ability to get that equipment in ground this year, which will then obviously significantly impact the schedule for using that real-time data to perform dam management. But we're not too concerned at the present moment. Project maintenance and land management. We'll wait and see after April 10th what the impacts are to veg work this year, the vegetation management and pond dredging. Right now, all eyes for project maintenance and land management are really focused on maintaining dam operations. And we talked about some of the capital projects and the board's made some determinations on those. So that just really leaves basic operations which haven't been affected. IT planning continues to move forward. I think right now the big takeaway is investment in technology, whether it's hardware or software, really being underscored just by the rapid increase in demand for tech. I think on Wednesday, when we had everybody working remote, what we were hearing from managed service providers is that they couldn't keep up with the demand for people wanting to migrate to Office 365 or install VPN in a 24-hour turnaround. And WebEx for a period of time was bottlenecked on new subscribers. So we've definitely seen staff really leveraging all of the GIS remote meeting technology and just their ability to be able to access information remotely. I think this particular event's really underscored the importance of being able to connect to the data and people that you need to be able to get work done. And the last area is policy planning. Becky's work group that Kate has been stewarding while Becky's been out on maternity leave. We do have a series of local water management plan meetings that we conduct annually with our cities. We've done about 3 of those. I think Minnetonka, St. Louis Park, Mound are the ones that we've met with. We have a number of others scheduled for the coming months. And we'll have to see where our municipal partners' heads are. Likely that meeting to discuss watershed management planning might not be their top priority. But if it is, we've got obviously plans to be able to do that work remotely. The kickoff of our partnership framework that would be permitting and the responsive model, that is definitely going to be impacted. Our ability to kick that off in May and begin big group meetings with all of our communities and meet face to face is going to be impacted. We're not quite sure how to adjust to that immediately. That's something that Becky, Kate, are just processing and thinking about. In the background, working with Tom and legal counsel on the rule alignment. That's a critical component of all that policy rollout. I think finally, in the coming weeks, another part of work that we'll have to look at is just evaluating any potential fiscal impact to the district and its cash flow. I don't think that there's any immediate reason to be concerned, but I have reached out to Hennepin County's CFO to discuss the potential for the legislature to postpone the deadline for property tax payments. I think generally at the state and federal level, there's been a demonstrated level of sympathy with regards to economic impacts and income tax deadlines being pushed. The same may happen for property tax deadlines, which is May. And so if those get pushed into July or August, there is a potential for that to impact the district. And speaking with the county CFO, he wasn't immediately concerned, and I will stay in touch with him to understand what the county's plans are. But essentially, if they're not collecting property tax, they won't be dispersing that to us. We don't fall within the same realm as the school districts who get advance payment from the county. at first pass, and I'm sure the board knows this, with the balances that we're carrying within capital finance and operations, I don't think that we need to be immediately concerned over the next 6 to 10 months. But it is something that I wanted to flag and is something that we'll be taking a closer look at in the coming weeks and then be able to report back on. I think the only other two notes that I have is that you should have received a notice from the Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts Executive Director, Emily Javins. The MOD Summer Tour has been canceled. They still have us on the docket to host in 2021. My only hope there is that with an extra year of planning, the expectations are proportional to all the extra time to plan. And then the final thing is we had a meeting this week with the Citizens Advisory Committee executive team, Kim, Becky, and myself, just to check in with them, see how they're doing, their willingness and ability to remain engaged and keep carrying some of the district's planning work forward. As you'll recall, last month they got into the first conversation of a series of conversations with regards to climate adaptation and had heard from the state climatologist, Kenny Blumenfeld. We're evaluating how to carry that work forward, whether or not that means we get all 15 CAC members participating in WebEx remains to be seen. I think tonight was a little bit of a test cookie or a pilot to see how smooth we can run meetings on this platform. So we are right now polling the rest of the CAC via online survey to find out their IT capabilities at home to participate in remote meetings, their availability or willingness. Obviously, everybody's situation is a little bit different. From there, we'll design a plan to keep them engaged and driving some of that longer range planning and policy work forward with the Citizens Advisory Committee. With that, I will take a breath and see if there's any questions, if there's concerns from the board, or suggestions for things that we might want to consider as we look to the near future.
I'll open it up. Anybody have questions for Mr. Whisker?
Gene Maxwell just have one question. The climate change, the guy talked March 3rd, was that on, they were going to tape that and put that on the website? Is that up yet, do you know?
That's true, Manager Maxwell. We did video that meeting and that's in the can. I've been talking to Trevor about how we chop that up and make that publicly accessible. And that's still something that we have not yet gotten live.
All right, thank you. Otherwise,
once we do that, we'll notify the CAC and the board to make sure that everybody has access.
Okay. Otherwise, you guys really did a great job of planning a lot of different things and really getting organized.
It was interesting too that the situation kept evolving and will keep evolving, and so you had to keep adapting, and that was really flexible or a good reaction on this part of staff. Anything else? I'm ready to adjourn if we have nothing else. The meeting is adjourned, and thank you everyone, and everyone stay well.
Be safe, everybody.
You too. Thanks.
You too.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.